I remember the exact moment everything shifted, even though no one else at that table seemed to fully understand it yet. My mother still calls that dinner a turning point, like it was some kind of healing moment for our family, something that brought us closer together. Maybe for them, it did. But for my daughter, Paige, it was something else entirely. It was confirmation of something she had already accepted long before any of us caught up, and that realization has stayed with me ever since, quietly reshaping how I see everything that came before. Paige is 16 now, but she has always carried herself like someone older, not in the way people admire, but in a way that makes them uncomfortable. She is quiet, but not shy, and definitely not cold. The problem is that people often expect reactions from others that reassure them, little signals that say everything is fine, that they are liked, that they are understood. Paige never learned how to perform that kind of emotional maintenance. Instead, she learned something else much earlier than she should have. She learned that explaining herself usually led to being misunderstood, so she stopped trying as much. Over time, she became selective with her energy, choosing silence over constant correction. Our family, on the other hand, has always mistaken performance for openness. If you speak confidently, smile easily, and present your life in a way that is easy to digest, you are seen as successful, even if that image is only surface deep. My sister Linda's son Ethan fit perfectly into that mold. He was everything people recognized and celebrated without hesitation. He played varsity soccer, held a position in student council, and had a firm, confident handshake before he even turned 15. Adults adored him because he reflected back the version of success they understood. At every holiday gathering, someone would inevitably call him the future of the family. Sometimes it was said jokingly, but not always, and even the jokes carried a certain truth that no one questioned. Paige was usually somewhere nearby when those comments were made. She would sit quietly, scrolling through her phone or typing rapidly on her laptop, her fingers moving with a kind of focus that most people didn't bother to notice. To the rest of the family, that behavior translated into disengagement. They saw a teenager lost in screens, disconnected from reality. Linda would often tilt her head slightly and say that Paige lived online, her voice carrying a tone of mild concern that others quickly agreed with. Conversations would move on as if they had just discussed the weather, simple and unimportant. In the beginning, I tried to correct them. I would explain that Paige was learning coding, that she was working on real projects, that she was part of a mentorship program that connected her with professionals. I thought that if I explained it clearly enough, they would understand and maybe even appreciate what she was doing. But over time, I started noticing something that felt deeply humiliating. The more I explained, the less interested they became. My words sounded abstract compared to Ethan's trophies, his games, his neatly packaged achievements that required no translation. Eventually, I stopped offering explanations unless someone asked directly, and even then, I kept it brief. That silence, I now realize, was partly my failure. The dinner happened in February at my grandmother Ruth's house. She had fallen twice within a short period, and suddenly everyone became aware of how fragile time could be. Family gatherings, which once felt routine, were now treated with a sense of urgency and sentimentality. That night followed the same familiar patterns at first. Ethan spoke confidently about his college visits, listing campuses and programs while my uncle nodded approvingly, and occasionally slapped the table in agreement. Linda sat beside him, trying to appear modest, but clearly glowing with pride that she could not fully hide. Paige sat at the far end of the table, eating quietly and only speaking when someone addressed her directly. As I watched her, I noticed something that unsettled me. She had become incredibly still during these gatherings over the years, almost as if she were bracing herself, like someone waiting for a storm to pass. It was not fear exactly, but a kind of quiet endurance that no one else seemed to recognize. Then my grandmother Ruth turned her attention toward her. There was no cruelty in her expression, just genuine curiosity. She asked Paige what she actually did online all day. A few people smiled automatically, expecting a simple, harmless answer, something that would confirm what they already believed. For a brief moment, I felt a surge of tension, wondering if Paige might finally react. After years of being dismissed, part of me almost wanted her to push back, to force them to see her, but that is not what happened. Paige looked up slowly from her plate and answered in a calm, steady voice that carried no trace of defensiveness. She said that she worked with a cybersecurity training group through State Tech. The table fell into a brief silence, but it was the kind of silence filled with confusion rather than understanding. My father frowned slightly and asked if she meant classes. Paige shook her head and explained that it involved incident response simulations. Linda let out a small laugh, clearly unsure how to process that information, and asked if it was something designed for teenagers. Paige nodded once and added that they sometimes consulted as well. The room shifted, though not completely. People sensed that this was something more than they had assumed, but they didn't yet grasp what it meant. My grandmother asked if she got paid, and Paige replied that she received a stipend. She said it so casually that it almost passed unnoticed at first. Then something changed. My brother-in-law Mark, who had been relatively quiet until then, suddenly looked up with sharp interest. He asked if she was part of the State Tech Sentinel program. Paige glanced at him and confirmed it with a simple yes. That was the moment everything truly shifted, not emotionally at first, but professionally. Mark worked in IT management for a hospital network, and for the first time in years, someone at that table recognized what Paige was talking about without needing it explained in simpler terms. Mark immediately said that he knew the program and mentioned how incredibly competitive its acceptance rate was. The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. Linda looked at him, then back at Paige, her expression no longer confident but uncertain. She said that Paige had never told them about this. Her voice carried something complicated, not quite accusation and not quite admiration, but a sense of disorientation. The narrative they had all accepted for years was beginning to crack. Questions began to come quickly after that. People wanted to know how long Paige had been involved, what exactly she worked on, how she had been recruited. Paige answered each question politely, offering clear explanations without embellishment. But as I watched the conversation unfold, I felt a growing discomfort that I struggled to put into words. It wasn't because they were finally interested in her. It was because I could see them recalculating her value in real time, adjusting their perception based on information that suddenly made sense to them. Mark asked about certifications, clearly impressed. My father leaned forward, listening intently in a way I had never seen before when Paige spoke. Even my grandmother looked slightly embarrassed, though I doubt she fully understood why. Ethan, sitting beside Linda, became quieter, not out of jealousy, but because the spotlight had shifted in a way none of us had anticipated. And the most striking part of all was Paige herself. She did not react the way I expected. There was no visible relief, no sense of vindication, no moment of satisfaction at finally being understood. Instead, she remained composed, almost distant, as if this sudden attention didn't mean much to her at all. Later that night, after the dishes had been cleared and conversations had broken into smaller groups, I found her sitting alone on the back porch. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, her phone resting on her knee as she looked out into the dark yard. I asked if she was okay, and she nodded without looking at me. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of something I should have said long ago. I told her that I should have defended her more over the years, that I should have made people understand. She kept her gaze fixed ahead and said quietly that it wouldn't have changed anything. I tried to argue, telling her that it would have made a difference, but she gently insisted that people hear what already fits into their understanding. Her words stayed with me because I knew she was right, even if I didn't want her to be. Inside the house, I could hear the faint clatter of dishes and Linda speaking softly to Mark. Life continued as if something small had shifted, but not enough to disrupt the flow completely. Over the following weeks, the family's behavior toward Paige changed. They treated her with more care, more respect. At Easter, my uncle asked for her opinion on online privacy for his business, speaking to her as if she were suddenly an authority. My father began mentioning her accomplishments to neighbors, using terms he barely understood but clearly valued now. From the outside, it looked like progress, like recognition finally given where it was due. But to me, it felt late. The real change had not been in their perception of Paige. It had been in my understanding of her. That night made me realize that she had already moved beyond needing their approval long before they ever noticed her worth. And that is the part my mother does not see when she calls that dinner a turning point. For them, it was the beginning of understanding. For Paige, it was simply confirmation of something she had accepted years ago. She had already built her world quietly, without waiting for validation, without needing recognition. By the time they finally saw her, she no longer needed to be seen.